On March 10, 2026, the Lift Lab announced that Heeseung would be leaving Enhypen and continuing his career as a solo artist. He would remain under Lift Lab, but Enhypen would continue without him as a 6-member group. The announcement immediately created confusion because Heeseung wasn't leaving the company or the industry, he was leaving the group itself. Lift Lab stated that the decision came after extensive discussions with Heeseung and the other members about Enhypen's future and their individual goals. The company said Heeseung had a distinct musical vision and that it had decided to respect his direction. Lift also announced that he would be preparing a solo album. Heeseung released a handwritten letter alongside the announcement. He said he had spent a long time discussing his music and future with the company and had carefully considered the decision. He acknowledged that fans would have questions, but said he had ultimately decided to follow the direction suggested for his future. However, Lift's announcement did not explain exactly why pursuing that solo career required Heeseung to leave Enhypen. That became one of the biggest points of discussion almost immediately. Fans began pointing out that K-pop artists can release solo music while remaining members of their groups, so many questioned why the same arrangement wasn't possible here. The reaction quickly moved beyond ordinary disappointment. Fans began organizing petitions demanding that Heeseung be allowed to pursue his solo career without leaving Enhypen. One of those petitions would eventually surpass 2 million signatures, turning the situation into a much larger dispute over whether Heeseung's departure had actually been necessary, with supporters from 194 countries before the petition closed on March 17th. The campaign wasn't limited to online signatures. Within 24 hours, protest trucks were sent to HYB's Seoul headquarters, with messages demanding that Lift reverse the decision and allow Heeseung to remain in Enhypen. Some fans used the phrase, "Enhypen is always 7, while others specifically argued that Heeseung's solo career should not have required him to leave the group. A major argument behind the campaign was that solo activities and group membership are not mutually exclusive in K-pop. Fans pointed to other idols who have released solo music while continuing to promote with their groups. Their argument was not necessarily that Heeseung should never have gone solo, it was that they believed he could have done both. Then there was Heeseung's own wording. In his letter, he said he had discussed his work with the company for a long time and had ultimately decided to approach fans according to the direction the company suggested. Some fans interpreted that wording as evidence that leaving Enhypen may not have been entirely his original choice. That interpretation was never confirmed by Heeseung or Lift, but it became one of the main theories driving the backlash. At the same time, fans began looking back at Heeseung's final activities before the announcement. Some claimed that his behavior during recent fan events seemed unusual, or that he appeared less energetic than normal. Others pointed to comments he had made about Enhypen's future shortly before March 10th. But these observations are fan interpretations, not evidence of what Heeseung privately knew or wanted. And while the petition continued growing, Lift Lab didn't simply ignore it. On March 15th, the company gave another statement making its position much clearer. Heeseung would not be returning to Enhypen. But the explanation behind that decision raised an entirely new argument, because Lift now addressed why it believed Heeseung's solo career and Enhypen could not continue together. The backlash became so large that Lift Lab addressed the situation again on March 15th. This time, the company made one thing clear: Heeseung would not be returning to Enhypen. Lift explained that Heeseung had a clear artistic direction he wanted to pursue, and that because Enhypen's schedule was extremely demanding, the company concluded that allowing him to focus fully on a solo career outside the group was the best arrangement for everyone involved. Meanwhile, Enhypen had already begun moving forward as 6. On March 14th, just 4 days after the announcement, the group performed in Melbourne without Heeseung. For fans who had spent years seeing Enhypen as 7 members, this was the first major public confirmation that the lineup had actually changed. Then the situation became even more confusing because Heeseung largely disappeared from public activities. Claims began circulating online about his whereabouts, including footage that some fans said showed him outside a building looking distressed. Some people even claimed he was crying. The footage did not establish what had happened, and there was no official confirmation that Heeseung was crying or that the footage had anything to do with his departure. It therefore remained an unverified fan theory, rather than evidence of how the decision was made. For several weeks, there was still no clear picture of what Heeseung's solo career would actually look like. Then, on April 8th, Belift Lab introduced him under a new stage name, Evan. He opened new official social media accounts and began promoting himself separately from the identity he had used throughout his Enhypen career. Belift explained that Evan was a name Heeseung had cherished since childhood and that it represented a more personal artistic identity. Heeseung himself said he hoped to use the name to express his most honest and natural self. For fans already divided over his departure, the rebranding created another major question. Was this simply a new stage name for his solo career, or the beginning of an entirely separate chapter from Enhypen? By May 11th, Belift Lab confirmed that Evan was preparing new music for a June release. The company also highlighted that Heeseung had already demonstrated songwriting, composing, and producing abilities during his time in Enhypen, meaning his solo career was not being presented as a completely new direction musically. Then, on June 22nd, Evan officially released his first solo single, Ride or Die. The release contained 2 tracks, the alternative rock title track Ride or Die and the indie pop B-side Overflow. Evan also took a much more direct creative role, participating in songwriting, composition, production, and the overall visual direction of the project. But while Evan was beginning his solo career, the Enhypen controversy had not disappeared. Some fans continued treating the group as 7 members and used 7-member chants during Enhypen events, while others argued that continuing to reject the 6-member lineup was unfair to the remaining members. That eventually led to the members addressing the issue themselves. In July 2026, Youngwon spoke about the continuing reaction during a live broadcast. He acknowledged that some people still loved the Enhypen they knew before Heeseung's departure, but firmly stated that Enhypen is now 6 members. Jae also publicly reinforced the 6-member lineup. This created another divide within the fandom. Some fans accepted that Heeseung had moved on and supported both Evan and the 6-member Enhypen. Others continued to criticize the decision and argued that Heeseung should have remained in the group. There were also fans who supported Heeseung's solo career but disagreed with how the separation had been handled.